Are young voters leaving Biden? Yeah, kinda. We're going to talk about it with someone who's an expert on it and runs an organization that appeals to young voters. It's Cristina Sinsun Ramirez. She was actually the U.S. Senate candidate back in 2020 in that interesting race down in Texas. She's formed some of the largest and most effective voter registration groups in Texas, and she's now the president of NextGen America, which is directed at getting young people to vote. Cristina, great to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. So, Cristina, let's talk about NextGen and Biden and the young voters. Let's start with, is it true that younger voters are now having issues with Biden or the Democratic Party?
Well, I think both you and I know as progressives for a long time, young voters have said that they see themselves as independents, that really what they care about more than anything is progressive policy instead of the party. And so that's the data is holding true for that in this upcoming presidential race. But let's remember that in 2020, Biden was really underwater with young voters leading up to the election, and then he won the youth vote by 25 points. We are living through a moment where young people are really flexing their political power. They are voting in massive numbers. Highest youth voter turnout in 2020, high youth voter turnout in 2022, when again, Biden's poll numbers were really low. But what young people are turning out for is, again, to remake the Democratic Party and make it more progressive. And whether we look at student debt, climate change, taxing the rich, or talking about the power of the labor movement, we've come a long way in pushing the Democratic Party. And I think there's a lot more that young people want to get done. And it's clear between Trump and Biden, there's really only one candidate that we can push.
Yeah, so look, this is not a conversation about Democrats versus Republicans. The Republicans are hopeless. They offer nothing to the young people except disdain and bigotry, etc. So I don't want anybody to mistake that part of the conversation. But Democrats have to earn their vote. And Christina's right. It made all the difference in 2020. There was 11% higher voter turnout among the youth vote in 2020. And that alone won Biden the election in the 3 swing states he needed to win the Electoral College. Period. Young people made him president. 2022 show up in big numbers, make a big difference. So, look, Christina, I'll ask the question, even though I kind of know the answer, and now so our audience is also younger, they kind of know the answer. But why don't Democrats just get the younger vote and animate them? Why don't they try harder? Why don't they say, look, Biden's done a halfway job on student debt. He just remembered his promise on marijuana the other day. These are all halfway, quarter way, and a whole bunch of things are zero way. It's so easy, and they're making all the difference. Well, what's stopping them from giving them more?
That's for me, NextGen people should know we endorsed Biden. I voted in 2016 and in 20 for Bernie Sanders, and then I went and voted for the Democratic candidates. And that's a lot of young people, right? I've been an organizer for 20 years, organizing undocumented immigrant workers, organizing with United Auto Workers that are on strike right now, organizing young people across the country to make demands on politicians and move them to deliver on real policy change for working people. And as an organizer, it's always a calculus about how much we can move and push. And I think that's exactly what young people need to do in this moment is say, look, we've won a lot. We demanded a lot of the Biden administration, and they have delivered a lot, but there's still more we want to win. And so how do we elect again for another 4 years, but win with some real policy demands? Right now, Vice President Harris is touring colleges across the country. They are courting the youth vote. Our organization has been around for 10 years. This is the first time I've ever seen the Democratic Party start to really take seriously the power of the youth vote, but also understanding, again, young people care about progressive policy. That is fundamentally what they want. They want a disruption of the status quo, the politics of usual. They want a generation that is willing to look at real racial justice, economic justice, LGBTQ equality. This is a generation that is not just trying to make changes at the margins, but again, a real changing of how politics is done in this country. We've come a long way from where we were in 2016, we all know, but we still have a long way to go as well.
And you can tell the Democrats have noticed, at least to some degree, because right before the 2022 midterms, Biden said student debt relief. So he must have seen the polling on it. And by the way, and it totally worked. and it got a lot of younger people to come out. So let me ask it in a proactive way. If you could get them to do one thing for younger voters, that would ensure, because, and actually before I even ask you the question, let me explain to the audience the framing of this, because back in 2020, 55% of young voters said they were definitely going to vote. That number is now down to 51% for 2024. And you might think 55 to 51 is not that big a deal, except that Biden beat Trump by only 43,000 votes in those 3 swing states. So that 4% might make all the difference if the election is that close again. So, Christina, again, proactively, what's the one thing that you would ask the Biden administration or the Democrats to deliver on for younger voters so they can get that excitement back up?
I mean, you're exactly right on those numbers and how close it's going to be. I'm glad the Biden administration has already delivered on historic legislation to tackle the climate crisis. But, when we talk to young people across the country, there has been change on marijuana, but there needs to be a massive decriminalization of marijuana and reform, and letting people out of prison that are there for selling or smoking marijuana. And then also looking at how I know it has to be done in Patrick, but how do we decriminalize marijuana across the country? This is a very popular issue with young people, and it goes a long way too against the gender divide. There's actually a pretty big gender divide, about almost a 20-point margin between female young people voting and males voting for Democratic. It's almost 19-point difference. And so if you want to make up that margin, a really popular way to do that is with reform on marijuana. Yeah.
And so, all right, I'm going to put you in a difficult spot again, because look, marijuana, on the one hand, give Biden credit. He said he would reschedule marijuana. He didn't promise descheduling. He promised rescheduling. And that's what he announced the other day, moving it from a Schedule 1 drug where you can't even do research on it to a Schedule 3 drug. But why? Why stop at Schedule 3? Why not just decriminalize it? It's now, I think, polling above 70%, not for young people, for the whole country. And young people in particular would say, finally. And it would be a bit of a historic move. So what is wrong with them? Is it just that Biden is stuck in the 1990s and he's got the war on drugs? This is what your brain looks like on war on drugs? Why don't they do that?
Well, I don't work for the Biden administration, but I can tell you that, I think that what we should do is we continue to push. You and I are both organizers. We know that candidates, elected officials are only as good as the movements that push them and move them in the right direction. And so I see this as an organizing moment for us to continue pushing and making this our demand. If you want young people to turn out in 2024, then there's some more delivery of progressive policies. And so again, I don't think we would have historic legislation on climate, on movement, on executive action on student debt. We wouldn't have our first female Black Supreme Court progressive justice in this country had it not been for record-breaking youth voter turnout. That means we have to continue to flex our power to get a lot more of what we want. We've gotten a lot in a short time period. I really want people to remember that. If you are unhappy that we haven't gotten fully what we wanted, that means we need to keep asking for more. If you've gotten fully what you wanted, it means you didn't ask for enough. So the fact that we haven't gotten everything that we wanted means we're moving in the right direction as a movement, as progressives, as young people, demanding that this administration and government be fully responsive to the largest, to the most progressive and diverse generation in American history.
Yeah. So look, Christina and I are both progressive. We're both activists of a different sort. But we do part ways on, she told you earlier she's endorsing Biden. At this point, I probably fair to call me ABB, anybody but Biden, in the Democratic primary, such as it is. But on the other hand, and I said it on today's episode of the Young Turks, if Biden canceled your student debt, you're crazy not to vote for him, right? And he did, and because somebody wrote in, and people are writing in all the time now, oh my God, I got my student debt canceled. Great, wonderful. In fact, I disagree with Christina in the opposite direction. That's good enough. If I just had $12,000 in student debt or whatever the number is wiped away, I'm voting for that brother. Okay. So, but now in terms of the part where we disagree on the opposite side, Christina, it's super frustrating to have to constantly push our leaders. Why do we have to push them? Why don't we pick leaders who you don't have to push, who already agree with us? What is it with the Democrats that we always have to be okay, now I know, of course, you're not on the side of your voters, of course. But pretty please, can you help us a tiny bit? so frustrating.
I mean, my viewpoint, look, I live in Texas where you want to talk about like, it's a tough road, and being a progressive here for a long time was really hard, but I've always loved doing work here because I think that there is no lefty choir to preach to. There's only non-believers to convert. And when I look at the Democratic Party, it is not monolithic by any means. We have real progressives for the first time, whether we're talking about AOC, or we're talking about Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, or my good friend that used to work with me organizing construction workers, Congressman Greg Casaro. We have real progressives now in Washington fighting for us. They are not the majority. They are the minority. That is correct. And we have to continue to organize and elect progressives, and then move and push the moderates as far as we can, because the way districts are set up, we're not going to always be able to have every single candidate be progressive. But if we can support our progressive candidates and push moderates, that's how we win in organizing. And I think we've actually won a lot in the last few years. And I am with you that we have not won everything, and that there's a lot more we need to win. And I wish we could just make it happen overnight. But as a long-term organizer, I know that we have to build the political power and will to win for the communities that we represent. I don't ever trust elected officials to get that done on their own. No matter how great they are, they need the power and the accountability of communities organized, pushing them in the right direction.
Yeah, and so Greg Casaro, by the way, is great, and he's just Democrat. I'm super happy that he made it into Congress, and he's fighting the good fight, and thrilled to have him there. So I don't want people losing hope. There's really good folks out there that are trying to do the best they can. And Democratic Party, take over the Democratic Party is going a little slower than we had hoped, but it's there, and there's 11 Justice Democrats. There's more progressives in Congress every day. Now, of course, the way you can win the election instantly is Biden comes out and says, this is the reason why they don't do the things that are popular, not among just Democratic voters, but of the whole country, is because of corporate PAC money. Everybody knows it. And the only people who don't know it are corporate media and corporate politicians. If Biden said, I'm in any way, shape, or form banning corporate PAC money, he'd win in a landslide. But God forbid you should be against the money. Okay, but let's get on to rosier topics as well. Hot Girls Vote. What is that, Christina?
Hot Girls Vote is our wildly successful campaign. Megan Thee Stallion, of course, made it really famous as well. We already had the campaign, but it was awesome to see her uplift it. Hot Girls Vote, getting young women to organize and vote, talking about what we say the sexiest thing there is, saving democracy. It also corresponds with some of the organizing we're doing on dating apps. There was a 90% increase in the last few years of young people using dating apps. So we have thousands of volunteers that are sliding into people's DMs, again, talking about the sexiest thing there is, which is saving democracy, and organizing and registering and churning out young people. It's also been a call for young women in particular that are rightfully pissed about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And so being able to really harness the power of young women across the country and folks that are impacted by the historic rollback on our rights of 50 years overnight.
All right. As you can tell, NextGen's doing a lot of good work out there and organizing the youth vote. Christina, thank you for joining us. Thank you for fighting the good fight and trying to push the Democratic Party towards a more progressive, and I would argue a more winning strategy. So we appreciate you. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.